Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm your host, Rob Dew, and today's date is Tuesday, July 24th, 2012, and here's a little look at what we have coming up tonight.
Tonight, U.S. troops to assist local authorities in criminal investigations, as the Associated Press reports that Marine Corps law enforcement battalions are training to control civil disturbances. Then, Ice-T defends gun rights and says it's the last form of defense against tyranny. Plus, a man with Tourette's says cops beat him for their own amusement. And Rob Dew talks with Webster Tarpley about the disinformation campaign against Syria. All that and more up next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
All right, as you can see, we have a big show, so let's get started right into the saga that is James Holmes, the so-called Batman massacre. I guess he's just the crazy nut now, but now we've learned that he has DARPA connections in his past. So let's just go over these real quick. In fact, they go all the way back to his grandfather. James Holmes was one of 6 recipients of the National Institutes of Health Neuroscience Training Grant at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in Denver. That was found by Wayne Madsen. The medical campus is recently decommissioned site for the U.S. Army's Fitzsimmons Army Medical Center and is named after Philip Anschutz, the billionaire Christian fundamentalist oil and railroad tycoon. Furthermore, Holmes also worked as a research assistant intern at the Salk Institute of the University of California at San Diego. Now, he did this in high school. And the Salk Institute teamed up with DARPA, Columbia University, the University of California at San Francisco, and the University of Wisconsin, Wake Forest, and the candy bar company Mars to prevent fatigue and combat troops through enhanced use of a blood-flowing, dilating antioxidant flavanol found in cocoa. So they made this magic chocolate that would keep troops going all the time. And so there's your first DARPA connection. The second one, in addition, James's father, Dr. Robert Holmes, worked for the San Diego-based HNC Software Incorporated, a company that worked with DARPA to develop chronic neural networks that enable machines to translate oral and visual stimuli and stimulate human thinking. But it doesn't stop there. The Holmes family appears to have deep connections to the military-industrial complex. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Holmes, grandfather of James Holmes, was a Turkish language graduate of the Army Language School, and later the Defense Language Institute in Monterey, California, the same installation, incidentally, where alleged 9/11 hijacker Saeed Al-Admi supposedly trained. So you got all these deep DARPA connections with James Holmes. You see him in court. His eyes are bugging out of his skull. He looks totally detached from reality. Nobody seems to be questioning that, at least in the mainstream media. Everybody else is wondering, what's this guy on? But, of course, there's nothing there. Now, ABC News, right when it came out, they reported, and it was on Drudge, it said, "Mother, you have the right person." And then it also said he's a member of a Tea Party. Well, now Politico is reporting Holmes' mother suggests ABC News mischaracterized her statement. And she was awakened by the media. Basically, the reporter asked if Arlene Holmes was my son, James Holmes. This is Arlene talking, who lives in Aurora, Colorado. I answered, "Yes, you have the right person. I was referring to myself." Then they ran with that headline, "You have the right person," trying to imply that she knew that this guy could explode at any minute, and they finally caught him. Well, in that very same article that ABC listed that information, they initially suggested the suspect might have connections with the Colorado Tea Party Patriots. The report was based off a single web profile of a man with the same name and was inaccurate. ABC News and one of its reporters, Brian Ross, later apologized for the mistake. So they're really quick to run out there and say, oh, he's a Tea Party. His mother knew that he was crazy, trying to keep that narrative alive and going forward so no one would question the initial story. And then you have the cops coming out saying no one else is involved, but you have eyewitnesses saying there were second shooters. There was a gas canister that came from another location. The lights and the projector went off at the same time while the shooter was in the process of shooting people. So this thing, of course, stinks to high heaven. Now, the same piece of news here is gun sales spike almost double after Batman massacre. And this is out of the Denver Post. said Friday through Sunday, Colorado approved a total of over 2,800 background checks. Again, a 43% rise in the same period. So you got a lot of people saying, I didn't think I needed a gun, but I do now. This is from Jake Myers. He works at the Parker Gun Store. What happens in your backyard, when it happens in your backyard, people start reassessing. Hey, I go to the movies. Should I have a gun? And here's another piece of news. Ice-T defends gun rights, saying they're the last form of defense against tyranny, and that's from Ice-T. He's been a big proponent of guns ever since he came out rapping back in the 80s. He says it's legal in the United States. The right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny. Not to hunt, it's to protect yourself from police. Okay, let's go to that clip now.
It's part of our Constitution. You know, the right to bear arms is because that's the last form of defense against tyranny. Well, I give up my gun when everybody else does.
There you go. So when everybody else gives up their guns, and he's talking about military and police, he'll give up his. Which leads us to our next story. Houston cop arrested for handcuffing and raping woman after traffic stop. And here we have a guy, Adon Carranza, who was on duty when there was a small fender bender. He handcuffed this woman, put her in the back of his car, and then allegedly raped her with his gun and badge on the entire time after everybody left the scene. So this is a gross example of why we need an armed citizenry, to basically hold in check those tyrannical forces that could become the police at any time. Well, we're not done there. Man with Tourette's says cops beat him for their own amusement. This is a Georgia man, suffers from Tourette's syndrome, says police deactivated a device that controls his symptoms and then beat him for their own amusement. He's suing Chatham County Sheriff's Office for negligence and infliction of emotional distress. Upon being brought to the Chatham County Jail for processing, Ray alleges he was warning officers that passing through the facility's metal detector would deactivate the battery-powered deep brain stimulator that helps him control his Tourette's syndrome. If the device was not work, Ray is prone to uncontrollable tics and obscene outbursts, typical with the neurological disorder. After the device was deactivated, Ray was at the mercy of the disorder, and he says cops repeatedly harassed him and beat him as a form of amusement. So there we've just shown you a couple instances of cops just overstepping their bounds. So we've just shown you a couple instances where police, these are just regular domestic police, have abused their authority and rape people, or at least allegedly rape people. They're beating people with Tourette syndrome. Later on in the show, Melissa Melton's going to cover this situation in Anaheim where after a young man was shot, people wanted to find out why they shot this unarmed man. Well, the cops they claimed it was a riot and started shooting rubber bullets into children. They released a dog on people and they claimed it was an accident. You know, the dog accidentally climbed out of the car and went chasing people down. You know, I guess that's how it works in police world. But now we're going to move to the military training inside domestically. So here's the article, Marine Corps Law Enforcement Battalions to Control Civil Disturbances. And this is from Steve Watson, Troops to Assist Local Authorities in Criminal Investigations. Units of hundreds of military police officers trained to investigate crimes have been created by the Marine Corps and will assist local authorities in securing crime scenes, building cases, reports the Associated Press. The report notes that the battalions will be capable of helping control civil disturbances, handling detainees, carrying out forensic work, and using biometrics to identify suspects. So we've been showing you this for a long time, and I'm about to go over some examples because I'm sure there's people in denial out there that the military is going to be working with civilians, and it kind of leads us to this last quote here in the article. Indeed, back in 2008, Washington Post reported 20,000 troops returning from Iraq would be stationed inside America under NORTHCOM for purposes of domestic security from September 11th onwards. Well, that was the Washington Post in 2008. By 2009, it had jumped to 400,000. We're going to go to a quick video here of Alex. This is from Police State for the Rise of FEMA, discussing just a few articles of the different troops that are being deployed all over the United States. So they may not be in your area today, but we're about to document a bunch of stuff in case you're in denial out there. Here's that first video.
Now, let's go ahead and go over these articles. Brigade Homeland Tour starts October 1st. 3rd Infantry's 1st BCT trains for new dwell time mission. Helping people at home may become a permanent part of active Army. And then you read this, the Washington Post reported it, everybody else did. It says, for riot control and civil unrest during a collapse of society. Then the Army War College came out a month later and said, yes, we're preparing to engage the American people. So there's that going on. So they have to have troops to take you to the FEMA camps. Washington Post, 20,000 more U.S. troops to be deployed for domestic security. They then expanded and said it won't be 4,000 troops, it'll be 20,000. Now they're saying, oh, it'll be 40,000 regular Army troops. The very troops that were in Baghdad doing gun confiscation, the very best troops they've got. Here's another one. Marines admit security force to operate inside U.S. This directly from the Marine Corps' own website. And they did it with role players, practicing confiscating people's guns. Here's another one. Unit learns skills to fight different enemy. And this is out of the American Force Press Service. See, this is all part of acclimation. And then in a four-state area in the Midwest a few months ago, there was a report about the Army suddenly locking down parts of cities and doing, and then the disgraced Governor Blagojevich announced about 5 months ago before he had that big scandal, and we played the newscast here where he said we're going to have the Army go door to door confiscating guns in Illinois.
So that's just a few articles, and that's just one section of the film, Police State 4, The Rise of FEMA, which we have at our INFOWARS shop. And I just want to go over a few more articles here in case you're still in denial. Florida Guard to support Super Bowl security. This is in 2007, okay? And that's the American Force Press Service. Here's another one, Tangled Up in Blue, posted March 5th, 2009. And this is about Marines conducting sobriety checkpoints in California. Okay, so the Marines are teaming up with the police, all to keep us safe. Here's another one, military police at Kentucky Derby. Okay, they were stationed there. They were helping pull people off the tracks because those guys could be terrorists, people who run on the tracks. And we have to have the police there. And basically, that's all conditioning to get you to look at, to basically acclimate you to having police on the streets. Here's that article that was just in the video you saw. The Pentagon wants the authority to post almost 400,000 military personnel in the United States. That came out August 12, 2009. So it's been going on for a while, and it's not going to stop. They're going to keep ratcheting it up. That's why, anytime we see these articles, we post them just to let you know that it's still happening. Now, the next piece we're going to go to, this is a news report that was also in Police State for the Rise of FEMA, and this has to do with police and National Guard training together to fight, domestic civil disturbances, terrorism, anything that may crop up. So this is out of Shreveport, Louisiana. Here we go with that clip.
Let's go ahead and get to this. I mean, you want to see what goes with FEMA camps like a horse and carriage. Troops, militarized police, training with the Army to take over your cities and towns. Let's go ahead and play this YouTube clip, Martial Law is Coming, from News 7 at 11.
The scenario was a fake, but the pepper spray and billy clubs used to break up this riot were definitely real. Good evening, I'm Miranda Stevens. Whether it's terrorism, riots, or any major disaster, local agencies will be the first to respond. That's why Roanoke City wants its disaster training to be as real as possible. Jeremy Butterfield has more.
Criminal investigations. As the Associated Press reports that Marine Corps law enforcement battalions are training to control civil disturbances. Then, Ice-T defends gun rights and says it's the last form of defense against tyranny. Plus, a man with Tourette's says cops beat him for their own amusement. And Rob Dew talks with Webster Tarpley about the disinformation campaign. Against Syria. All that and more up next on the InfoWars Nightly News.
All right, as you can see, we have a big show, so let's get started right into the saga that is James Holmes, the so-called Batman Massacre, I guess. Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm your host, Rob Dew, and today's date is Tuesday, July 24th, 2012, and here's a little look at what we have coming up tonight.
Tonight, U.S. troops to assist local authorities in...
I guess he's just the crazy nut now, but now we've learned that he has DARPA connections in his past. So let's just go over these real quick. In fact, they go all the way back to his grandfather. James Holmes was one of 6 recipients of the National Institutes of Health Neuroscience Training Grant at the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in Denver. That was found by Wayne Madsen. The medical campus has recently decommissioned site for the U.S. Army's Fitzsimmons Army Medical